Right, today's lesson then, it's a very quick video because it's basically a revision lesson for you, but I just thought I'd do a video to go along with that, as you all miss me so much, but also to make it a little bit easier for you to sort of follow. So we've looked at the GCSE skills since the start of year 7, basically introducing the more difficult questions, more difficult skills in years 8 and now year 9. Now, because of the awkwardness to this academic year with the lockdown and things, we haven't been able to really do it together this term, but we actually did cover everything before by Christmas of year 9. So in a way, you should know it, and you should be able to recall the simple facts. Now, this fact test is some simply facts, and it's facts that if you can remember them all, you won't make silly mistakes in the exams. So, just quick overview of the two papers. There's 2 English language papers. One, in paper 1, you get 1 extract, which is fiction, so a story or novel, and it'll be modern. You've got the 5 questions. Question 1, you just find 4 things. You've got to make sure it's full sentences and you mention the subject. Question 2, you analyse language, so you find quotes and you explain the effect. Question 3, you then look at the structural things, so how does it begin, how does it change, how does it end. Question 4, you evaluate the big methods, so you get a statement allegedly of a student saying something about the extract, and then you basically have to look at the whole extract and explain its impact. And then after they've set you up with all that, you got question 5 where you're going to describe or narrate. So there'll be a picture stimulus, and you use a bit of creative writing. There'll be some thematic or subject linked to the extract, so you've got some ideas, and you should have picked up a sort of overview of the sort of things they want you to do. So if the extract used a lot of metaphors or adjectives, then I need to do that. That's a good way of writing. If the extract starts in the middle of the action and has a sudden shift, then that's a good way to write a story. Paper 2 is very different. You'll have 2 extracts and then non-fiction, so there might be newspaper articles, diaries, journals, magazine articles, could even be a government advice maybe, but there'll always be one will be an old one, so 1800s, and then one will be a more modern. Now it could be we've had a 1950s one, we've also had one from like 2 years ago. So by modern, it just means after 1900 basically. And again, you got the 5 questions. Question 1, true or false. There's 8 options, you choose 4 that are true. You've got to make sure you read all 8, because remember there'll be a trick one near the bottom. Question 2 is the summary and the synthesis of information, so you basically have to look at both extracts and say how they're different. Question 3 is the same as question 2 on paper 1, but it's worth 12 marks, not 8. So you actually have to do a little bit more analysis. But again, it will tell you which extract to look at, and you analyse the language. And then question 4, you have to compare the methods. So it's like question 4 on paper 1, but this time you're comparing across 2 extracts. And then question 5, when we talk about transactional writing, it means transactional in the sense of there is a very specific purpose to it, and there is some form of transaction between you and the reader. So it might be you're writing a letter to the council about what there is for young people to do. It might be you're writing a letter to the head teacher about uniform or homework. And or it might be you're writing an article about recycling, or you're writing a speech to your classmates about using mobile phones. But the transaction will be you're trying to convince the audience to take action, or to change something. Right, so those are the two papers. We've looked at both over the past few weeks. You've had a go at bits and bobs. Here's an example of a paper one. You can zoom in and stuff if you want, because I'll send a PowerPoint as well. So you've got an extract there. Here's another bit on the end, but I didn't fill that on. You don't really need it to see an overview. You get 4 questions, as I've just explained. It's question 1. It lists 4 things from this part of the text about the weather in Cornwall. Question 2, you look at the language in this extract. Question 3, the structure. Question 4, you evaluate. And then question 5, you can either write a description or an opening of a story. And as you can see, they're both based on stormy weather. Obviously, there's a lot of stimulus in the picture, but also in the extract, because the extract is about storm. So it's all tied together, and it's important that you can start to see that. So for example, question 1 introduces the concept of the weather, and as you can see, it's bad. Question 2, you start to analyse the effects of the weather, which is different to talking about the weather, because we start to look at the effects on the people and the carriage and the ground and stuff. Question 3, we started to talk about the journey. And then question 4, it talks about the characters. You're not going to be asked to do the same thing twice. And there is a thread that runs throughout the whole paper. And the sooner you get used to that, and that sort of, and the pace of it, and the fact that it leads you through, then the more marks you'll get, because you won't be getting silly things wrong. Paper 2 is slightly more complicated. Remember, we looked at the differences between viewpoints and perspectives, and if you can understand that, that's the essence of the paper. So in this case, you've got a modern article about could you do your child's homework, and it's basically saying that homework is now becoming an increasing problem. And then there are 2 letters, I've only put 1 here for now, about somebody in 1822 talking about school. And again, they're very different in terms of viewpoint and perspective. And when you go to the questions, true or false? Remember, you read all 8. You circle the little circle in, and for the 4. You then got to write a summary of the differences. You then look at language. You then have to compare the methods, and then you do your own piece of writing. Now again, you can see the writing. Write an article for a broadsheet newspaper in which you explain your point of view. Now you don't have to agree with the statement, you can disagree, but again, you see it's homework. So there's no excuse for not being able to do question 5. They always give you some ideas, and it's why we always do a section A before we do a section B, because the ideas are there, the structures are there, and the formality is there. And again, it all flows together. So all the statements here sort of give you an overview of that source. You then write a summary of the differences. Now, because you've got a good grasp of source A from reading these, it makes that easier for you. Because you then had to look at source B, the language analysis is a bit easier. And then because you've done those 3 questions well, then question 4 is bringing it all together. So you shouldn't be afraid of this exam paper, even though it's a little bit daunting, because there's 2 extracts and there's a lot of reading and a lot of thinking. Right. And it just leads you through. So what you're going to be doing next lesson is you're going to be doing your fact test. So these are all the questions. They're all obviously based on the last 2 slides, and with general content, and there's a few little technique questions in there to check your subject knowledge. So what I want you to do for the rest of this lesson is I want you to revise. Now you've got the simple revision, which is you cover that. If you don't want to print it, you can just hold something up to the screen and test yourself. You can write them out. You could print it. A really good revision thing would be to print it, cut the end off, cut these up and then try and match them up. But that's obviously a lot of faff, but it's up to you. So just go back through all this, and then when you get to that, that's your revision. Alright? Well, good luck, and I hope it goes alright.